Much better. In the Navy, I might see any shorts as well. Men's shorts.
Can you double check we're live there?
No.
Please, thanks.
No.
Thank you very much.
Why isn't it showing me the live counter? Is it showing it on yours?
Yeah.
Why am I getting that? I feel left out.
Jermola here.
Oh my god.
Oh, it's streaming normally, but it's mirrored to me. That's...
I don't like this.
Welcome to yet another Friday live stream. Called the Friday Live Day today.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Just
know
something a bit snazzy.
He's
no?
wearing Nike Savaleos.
And short? No, that's not okay.
That's not alright, Gymshark. Gymshark,
That is not cool.
in the Navy.
Someone asked me the other day, because we're selling merch now.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked me the other day, like, "Oh, you're doing it like you're going to be like Gymshark." I said, "Geez, it'd be great if it was."
That would be all right. These are nice shorts.
Okay, let's start answering some people's questions. It would be great if everybody of the people who are viewing now went and liked the video. That would be massively helpful to us, and we'd appreciate it massively. Gazborough says, "Hey guys, would stacking up a seated calf raise and holding at the bottom position, heels down, help improve ankle mobility?" It would, right? So you're stretching a muscle, you're under quite a bit of tension, and you could stay there for a long time. So it kind of ticks a few of the boxes. There's a couple of issues with that though. So calf raises, normal calf raises, the like seated version that you're talking about, when your knee is in flexion, you're not necessarily stretching all of your calf, if you get what I mean by that. A lot of the time, you're just going to get the soleus, or you might just get a fraction of the gastrocnemius, but you're not going to get a kind of full calf stretch in the bottom. Not necessarily a huge issue if you're just doing it for squat mobility, but if you're trying to improve ankle mobility in general, then you certainly want to be doing a standing version of that calf stretch as well. The useful side of it, though, or why it might be positive, is you can stack a massive amount of weight on, a weight that you wouldn't be able to raise with one leg. And then you'd be able to unhook it from the machine, clip yourself, just go down one leg on the machine, one leg under tension, and then you're getting a massive amount of force going down through that muscle system or muscle and tendon system. And that would help improve your mobility, definitely. But depending what you're trying to do with your ankle mobility and why you're trying to improve it, it may be more beneficial for you to do a standing version of the calf stretch.
Yeah, it would probably be a good idea to just stretch in like a fully flexed knee position and then a fully extended knee position to ensure you're getting everything. So I think a lot of like certain levels of athletes, so basically anyone who's not a weightlifter or a CrossFitter, will spend their time stretching their calves in a fully extended knee position, so full extension of the leg. And they'll miss a lot of the, obviously, the soleus and your gastrocnemius and stuff. So you want to be in that fully flexed knee position, essentially at the bottom of a squat, to ensure you're getting everything. So you'd want to be doing both of those, in addition, so that the weighted calf stretches are very beneficial for sure. There's a lot to be said for just hitting the bottom of a squat frequently throughout the day for ankle mobility. Even if it's poor.
What I really like on that as well is sit in the bottom of a squat and get a 20 kilo plate and put it on your knee and then just push that knee forward.
But I mean like running off to the bathroom at work and just sitting in a squat for like a minute or two.
An agile working environment, like.
Just like, not letting anyone look at you because they'll be like, "What are you doing that for?"
Don't squat in public.
No, you can't squat.
Right.
Well, no, it depends how confident you are, and how nice your squat is, and what scenario you're in. If your squat's really ugly, no one's going to want to see you squatting. If you're like You're like Rambo, you know.
Why are you looking at me?
I'm not saying like, you know, you have really nice bodyweight squat. You
Like
know?
Rambo? Like,
Yeah, if you just squat like Rambo, you're not going to squat in public.
Rambo's the worst squat I've ever seen, I think.
I wonder if he's watching. But
He will be watching at some point, I bet.
You know, frequent squats throughout the day. I'm a big fan of those for squat mobility, for hip and ankle stuff. Frequently, because most people don't do things frequently enough. You know, a lot of times people will leave everything before training, and they'll come into training and they'll have major issues. They'll have a lot of different issues to fix, and then they'll try and fix them all before they get to training. And, you know, they've spent half an hour trying to fix things, which isn't the problem. And they might not even be trying to fix the things wrong. But you've spent what should have been an hour and a half in the gym training, start to finish, as soon as you walk into the gym, out of the gym. Like the last few weeks, I've been training properly again in terms of weightlifting, and I've done literally 45 minutes in and out of the gym. And I do a very thorough warm up, you know, and I've gotten productive training in, you know. So you get people who already spend too much time training as it is. Like they're just not appropriate getting through the exercises and rest time, and they don't have a plan what they're doing, and then they end up spending another half an hour trying to fix their mobility issues, and not necessarily the wrong way, you know. So I like the frequency, because they need the frequency and they need kind of time by themselves. Stretching is weird as well. The CNS stuff is weird, how the interactions happen. You know, some things, weird stimuluses will interact with different receptors. You know, thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, chemoreceptors, all have like different stimuluses, and they have all different tension relationships with the muscle. You know, like you can literally do this thing where you can stretch. Someone will put a cold spray on you while you're stretching. It'll interact with the thermoreceptors and you'll get a further stretch, like a lot more. So just like certain things interact differently, you know. So it's good to have time away from training to do your stretches, relax, you know, especially when you're looking for flexibility, like you're just looking for more range of motion at the joint, like we're talking about in that static stretching video. So we're just looking for, you want that joint to go further, essentially, you know. So it's good to have time after that to kind of relax and not go into high contractile environment, you know. So if you sit in the bottom of a squat and then you go into an aggressive Olympic lifting or something like that, you end up, you know, not confusing the signal, but you're putting the kind of the opposite relationship you're looking for in some ways on the muscle or the range of motion you're looking for. So I like that for ankle mobility specifically, and squat mobility. I like the frequency away from training as well. I think is very beneficial.
The last thing I'd say on ankle mobility, and I just want to mention this because it's an important point that somebody actually talked about it later on in the comments. Ankles take so much time, as Gareth has talked about, so much force, as we've mentioned before, and the frequency you're going to do it throughout your day and throughout your week is going to be so high that you get the occurrence of repetitive strain injuries is much, much higher. So you'll get people with like, they'll start stretching their ankles when they're running, or they'll stretch their ankles when they start weightlifting, or go focus on weightlifting more as transitioning over from CrossFit or something. And then suddenly they'll start getting this pinching pain or this really hot sensation in their Achilles tendon, because they're putting a lot of force through the tendon, and that tendon is really being stretched throughout the day. So you do have to be conscious of repetitive strain injury and just be keeping an eye on it, as you should be for all of your stretching. Okay. Up next, right, I'm going to mention the question, and we're not really going to answer the question because I think it's not really answerable in this kind of short form. Johnny Brown says, what's your take on trans people in sport? This takes an awful lot more nuance than me and Gareth talking for 4 or 5 minutes on that.
I have one thing I want to say about this that I haven't seen anybody else talking about this. And so this came up again recently with the swimmer. The swimmer who, as a male, had like 485th and then went to collegiate nationals. And Zach made a good video on this because he's pretty au fait with collegiate swimming in the US. And she came 5th or something, right? That is a poor representation of a trans male or trans, I don't know, whatever. So a male to female, that is a poor representation. That's actually a better reflection. It makes it look better in terms of egregious behavior when comparing a male to female with other females, is because those females have a high likelihood across high-level sports of also being doped. So the capacity of a natural female athlete is inflated because a lot of high-level of female athletics, just like with male athletics, use performance-enhancing drugs. And the difference here, especially high-level sports, is actually being crunched a little bit closer. So if we were to see entirely natural elite sports on the female side of things, and then if you saw a male to female trans athlete, I think you'd actually see even more egregious reduction in the placings.
Yeah.
That's one thing I haven't seen anyone talk about. Maybe it's hard to. There has been a lot of positive. Like look at East German doping for gold, for example. It's very prolific across obviously both genders. So it's just something that I haven't seen anyone talk about. But that's really all I wanted to say about that. To be honest.
Andrew Wells says he wore a Sika long sleeve on a Tinder date.
Nice.
And he scored. System works.
Yes.
Great. That's the kind of...
That's what they were bought for.
That's the kind of good news scenario we want to hear about. Okay. Dumas says he got his T-shirt. He really likes it.
Awesome to hear. That's great.
Gavin Heffernan. Good question, right? Go on.
We've started work already on March number 4. We're already on top of
it. And they look good, to be fair.
No, they looks...
Okay. Gavin Heffernan, regular commenter. When you talk about alcohol affecting performance, are there significant effects from any alcohol consumption at all? Or is it particularly binge drinking? So the unfortunate thing with this, Gavin, and I hate this answer as much as you hate this answer, right?
It's all
alcohol consumption is bad.
Don't try, Jimmy. Just understand that if you're going drinking, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's all bad. Like
and it's like the beer in the evening after training is bad. The glass of wine once a week is bad. And the binge drinking for 3 days in a row is bad. It's on a sliding scale. There's a spectrum of severity with it. We have to understand that, like, when you do certain activities, they're going to negatively affect sports performance. Now, Gavin, I'm not sure what you do for a living, but a lot of the time, most of us are...
Gavin, I'm not sure if you're a real person, but I'm going to tell you.
Gavin, I'm not even sure if that's your real name, but most of us are training for recreational purposes, right? We might like competing. We might take our training incredibly seriously, right? In the same way where a load of people take their hobbies or pastimes more seriously than they take their actual career. That's perfectly normal. I think people should be doing that. But you don't have to just write something off completely because it's not good for sports performance. It's like having friends and having fun with your friends and family is incredibly important. It's probably incredibly important for you adhering to a sports or a training protocol for a long time, right? Really restrictive ways of thinking and really restrictive kind of lifestyle protocols tend to just piss people off, and it stops them being involved in sport for a long time. I know in Ireland, in the GAA in particular, our kind of national sports organization, drinking bans are a huge thing. Obviously, drinking in Ireland is a major pastime of people, but they'll ban people for weeks in a row or months in a row from drinking. And what ends up happening is you get people sneaking out, or you'll get people hiding the fact that they're going out. And it really becomes very, very toxic. And then when they do go back on the drink, it ends up being much more negative for them. There are definitely sports here that we've had experience with, like rugby, where drinking and socializing as a team is very much a planned thing. You would go out after a game if you don't have a game the next weekend, or if you have a 2-week break, you might have a team night out, and then it becomes just very, very normal. It's part of the procedure, and it's never this kind of massive binge thing where you're going to lose a lot of performance. So to give you the shitty answer, yes, it will. Every single bit of alcohol will negatively affect your performance, but you probably don't need to cut it out completely.
Pim, so you're saying you didn't didn't arrive yet? I'm almost certain I saw your name.
Pim's went out.
Yeah, I'm almost certain I remember seeing yours a few weeks ago when Ian went out.
We'll write a note there and we'll take a look.
Yeah, I definitely saw Pim's name.
Pim was definitely sent out.
I remember seeing a lot of the names of familiar names, and stuff. So I definitely remember Pim's going out.
Okay. Andrew Wells says, do you think strict pressing for sets, etc., is good for general shoulder strength? I do bench and weighted pull-ups right now, but I was wondering if I should do some overhead work. Is this... No, that's Andrew Peck. I think strict overhead pressing is very, very important for a lot of sports or a lot of people's general shoulder health, because it gets you away from this kind of internally rotated shoulder position. So if we see for a lot of people, bench pressing will internally rotate their shoulders, their pecs will become more developed, their shoulders will become tighter, and their posture will become poorer. If we look then at pull-ups, particularly heavier pull-ups or people who are good at pull-ups, they'll become very internally rotated because they'll overdevelop the lat, and the lat internally rotates the shoulder as well. And both of those things, if they're your main focus in training, both of those things are going to really negatively affect your posture and get you really internally rotated. So if you're involved in a contact sport and your shoulder gets pulled back out of position like this, you're at a higher risk of injury. Also, if you're somebody who works at a desk or works in a quite sedentary work environment, internal rotation of the shoulder is going to happen anyway because everything is in front of you. So I would like to see some strict overhead pressing, and particularly strict overhead pressing with a barbell, because that forces you to have at least a neutral shoulder position and be working more towards getting your shoulders externally rotated, because you'll see the position will be negatively affected if you can't externally rotate or bring your shoulder to neutral.
George Ladder, coach of an underage rugby club, I assume, is saying, if you're designing pre-season S&C testing for a rugby team, what tests would you use?
The great thing is we do design pre-season testing for rugby players. Pre-season is a bit strange, and like pre-season testing has an issue because pre-season you're putting a defined point in it, and pre-season testing would usually mean the end of our off-season training, which is a huge amount of strength and power work. And we'd have some morphological testing as well, like body weight, body size, if they've been going up in weight or dropping down weight. That testing will be happening at the end of our off-season, start of our pre-season. And then we also have the initiation of our kind of heavy aerobic block. So usually you take some sprint times to make sure we're not slowing them down with our aerobic work. We'd also take something like a Bronco test, or we might have something like an Illinois T test or a 10-10-20 test. And any of these things will get us a marker for speed, agility, and then we'll look for a marker of general aerobic fitness. But pre-season testing is strange because you're testing to finish off your last block, which was off-season, and then you're testing at the start of your pre-season, which you'll expect very low aerobic values, or classically you'd expect very low aerobic values. Obviously not from the Seeker rugby players because their aerobic values are great.
I think if you had the luxury of dealing with the same team for a number of years, you could be a little bit more specific as well. So obviously with any of the rugby players Dara has, he would know the metrics they'd be looking for. So you'd be saying at the start of your pre-season, or your off-season, I should say. So at the start of your off-season, you'd be like, okay, we need to lose maybe 10 kilos, or we need to gain 5 kilos in appreciable mass. You know, you'd have the luxury of saying, all right, Dara, did you, at the start of this off-season, we said we were going to improve your aerobic capacity and we were going to drop 3 kilos, I think, as much as reasonably possible. That would be some very useful stuff as well. Like, so being really specific with each of the players, if you had the luxury of having those players and knowing them before. So obviously it might be a particular environment, so you couldn't always guarantee that kind of individual interaction, but that'd be very useful, you know, if you came into the off season with specific goals for each one of the players, and then you'd finish the off season before the preseason, you'd look at, did they hit those goals and metrics that the backs coach or the head coach or whoever said to you that they need to hit. You know, if they gave you specific things they need to work on, and did you feel like you improved on those things, you know, and you can test those specific things. So, you know, you mightn't, everyone should probably do the full gambit of testing that you're doing anyway, but then to improve that individual player, I think would be very beneficial as well. So you'd hope that player would be doing it individually by himself, but as their S&C coach, you should be there to support them as much as possible in that regard. So you'd be looking at, you know, did you gain that 20 kilos, or did you gain that 10 kilos that you needed, you know, now that you're 3 inches taller, because you went from 17 to 18 over the course of the summer, and you invariably grew an inch or something over the course of 3 months, you know, and your coach had the eye for that, and he said you needed 10 more kilos or whatever. You know, that kind of preseason testing would be very valuable as well, I think.
I think one thing I'd like to see, if I could wave a magic strength and conditioning wand today, one thing I would like to see is there being less of a drop off in people's actual aerobic condition between in-season and off-season, because most of the time, people lose so much of the work they put in the off-season. Like, they'll train their ass off for 8 or 10 weeks,
and then
stronger, faster, more powerful. They're like great condition. And then they have to go for 6 weeks of running because they're not fit enough to move around the pitch. Like everybody we have for off-season work, they'll tell you the amount of running volume they do. Like we just had an AFL player going back 3 or 4 weeks ago to do testing with his team at the start of the season, and he got the #1 beep test out of everyone else, and his off-season was only weightlifting. Like weightlifting with an appropriate amount of aerobic work will get you a huge amount or maintain a huge amount of your aerobic conditioning. People lose years of their life cumulatively with the amount of training time they miss out on because they go to an off-season block, they're like, fuck it, I'm gonna get huge. And then they'll gain 15 kilos, they'll have to drop 7 kilos of it in within 6 weeks, and then they're going back in a kind of semi-shite place. Like you want to be bigger, but you need to make sure you're not so big that you're going to have to lose weight in your preseason.
I'd say the drop off in aerobic capacity over the off season is synonymous with non-professional rugby the world over.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think every single team and club, the vast majority, bar 1 or 2 dedicated players, will lose a huge amount of aerobic, if not all of their aerobic conditioning, because it's not their full-time job. Some of them might be like semi-pro. They've other priorities, and there's different levels of dedication across the team. And they go in and play their season, and when they finish the season, they're like, "Well, fuck rugby now, anyway. I'm fucking sick of running." And then there's that psychological dread when you come back in for those first 6 weeks, where the coach is like, "Fuck, everyone's out of shape."
Yeah,
and the coach will know that's what's coming, and it's like, right, it's literally just running tonight. And in some ways, you can't blame the coach for that. For that behavior,
they have to do it. Like, they have to. Like, there's no other choice,
and there's nothing to replace that kind of sport-specific activity. You know, that running and stuff, especially if they let their conditioning drop off a lot. You know, you can lose certain. You don't have to be in match shape all the time and that have massive levels of aerobic capacity, but you should still be able to keep like 80% of it fairly intelligently with your training, and then you can come back in season and then just brush off the cobwebs a little bit for that in-season conditioning, and then get back to like running specific stuff. You know, it's like it's so synonymous with amateur field sports. Is people come back into season in terrible shape,
and they will be. They'll have done the right thing in off season. You'll have gotten bigger and stronger, but it means nothing if you have to immediately reverse it. Like we just had a player get a pro contract last week who trained with us for 18 months, you know, like really good work, really diligent working the whole way through.
Oh, one of the best athletes we ever had. It's
phenomenal. So like this stuff does work. People think it's like going to be, I'm not going to get the same results because I'll still have to do some running and some aerobic work during the summer, you know. It's like, no, you have to sit on a bike once or twice a week and you have to do a tiny bit of work on the pitch and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Guido.
No. Have you found that your strength training has had more or less transfer to your BJJ training than you previously thought? It had exactly as much transfer as I thought it was.
Which is so much.
It literally had the exact amount of transfer it would have. I thought it would have. I couldn't have been more accurate with that. It's what I imagined my strength would do for me is exactly what I thought my strength would do for me.
Yeah. And you cannot override the amount, the amount that helps.
Yeah.
Like it's massive. Huge. Okay, Guido is up next. How to work on wrist position in the snatch if you have hyperextension like this. Hyperextension in the elbow. My wrists are under a lot of strain in the lockout, even with low weight. Is there a solution? Internal or external rotation? First thing I would say is you need to sort out this position of the wrist overhead. A lot of the time, so when we have abduction of the wrist, which is this, people are restricted in their abduction of the wrist. Then when they try to hold onto a bar, the bar gets held in the very outside of the hand. And we feel some pressure here, or you might feel some pressure on the front of the wrist. What you actually need to do is you need to be stacking your wrist in a more straight up and down position. What people will do is they'll start stacking their wrist in this kind of 90-degree position, which is incredibly weak. They'll just allow it to sit there on the tendons, and they'll make up for a shitty position by having loose wrists. Particularly if you're feeling pain, you're already down that road, you know. So you need to get that stacked wrist position. It's not this, like it's not fully straight, but just slightly back so that weight is coming straight down through the wrist. And then I would start with hit the position with a PVC pipe, a timber dowel, an 8 kilo bar, 15 kilo bar, and press really strict, making sure your positions are good. Really just take your time to ingrain these positions, then slowly start moving up through the snatch grip, strict press. Don't make it dynamic, make it super slow, make it very, very like tempo specific, and then just gradually move through the reps, and that will help. As somebody who's waiting to get their wrist operated on, that's what you should do.
At what point should you start wearing a living belt? How much will it help your
Lifting
lift?
belt.
I got that. Obviously, I knew that was lifting belt. There's no real point when you have to start wearing a weightlifting belt. In general, we would recommend that you wait at least a year before you wear a belt. If you're very new to strength training, after that, then you can kind of pick and choose and make decisions based on how your training goes and what you prefer and what you don't prefer. Then you can kind of start deciding if you want to wear a belt, but you don't have to start wearing a belt at any point. How much to help your lifting? Again, it varies depending on the lifter and the person and what kind of lift you're doing, and what your preferences are and how long you spend training your belts, and when you start warming up with your belts, at what stage you start putting on your belts. Some lifters, for example, like at the extreme end, like Gabriel St. Crane, will only wear a belt in competition or his heaviest possible clean jerk, but wouldn't wear it then for 98% of the rest of his training. And then you have other people who will put on a belt at 100 kilos and then whatever lift they're doing and just wear it for the whole thing, So it really depends how much it'll help your lifting. I don't really think belts give you a whole lot. I think they just give you a little bit more consistency over a longer time frame as opposed to mechanical advantage on one lift. I think this assists you over the seasons and over the sessions and over the weeks. You have those sets and reps. When you just have that belt and it helps you a little bit more, it kind of adds up. But I don't think, to be honest, other than the top level, maybe the heaviest possible squats of someone's genetic ability, will they really be seeing much of a difference with their belts and things in terms of like actual numbers. It's not similar to knee sleeves. I think when people get used to a belt, I think they get used to it psychologically as opposed to mechanically. Like with knee sleeves, they undeniably give you assistance in relation to the mechanical advantage from the sleeves. But with the belt, unfortunately, it's more of a kind of a bracing mechanism as opposed to massive additional mechanical advantage. Rarely will your back losing position make you miss an outright 1RM. Now, it's not advantageous across multiple sets and reps. This is why most people wear them, but it's not like that advantage you'll get with knee sleeves.
Ewan Tyndall says, how do you think about getting back on training after messing up your training, or back on track after messing up your training? For example, a couple of sessions missed because of bad sleep or nutrition. Do you restart the week or the whole program? I'll tell you what our general rule of thumb is for all Seeker members, everyone who's in the group, all those athletes. So if you miss 1 week of training, you regress 1 week of training. So if I was about to start week 5 and I miss week 5, then I go back and I start week 4. If I miss 2 weeks of training, I regress 2 weeks of training. If I was about to start week 5, I go back 2 weeks and I start at week 3 and I push through again. Anything beyond 2 weeks of missed training, you restart the block. And if you're towards the start of a block or you weren't kind of in shape to start off with, you will have to do a kind of restart block or a ramping up block. So for weightlifters, that will look like the getting back to training program. For other people, that will look like week 1 minus 20%, then week 1 minus 10%, and then week 1. It is, in all of my experience, and I'm sure Garth will be the same on this because it's something we talk about all the time, people get back into training too quickly. They push volume too quickly. They push intensity too quickly. They expect themselves to be back exactly where they were, particularly with all the colds, flus, viruses, and stuff going around at the moment. People are getting sick. They'll miss 4 or 5 days of training, and then they'll expect to kick off immediately from where they were. In fact, when you're back in position to be able to train again, you're still probably fighting something. You still have heightened levels of inflammation and you're under stress. And so you really want to take your time getting back into it now. So taking the extra time, regressing that extra week or 2 weeks will make a massive difference.
Greg is saying, will daily 1 hour of zone 2 cardio have a negative impact on my squat strength? It depends on a few things, your genetics, your anatomy, how strong you are, how much squatting you're doing at the moment, what you want to do with your squat. Are you trying to maintain your squat? Are you trying to improve your squat? Are you doing the cardio to lose weight and you're happy to maintain your squat? It would depend on a few of those things. I would say an hour daily, if it's actually zone 2, so if you're kind of getting into an elevated heart rate, so like triple digits heart rate or beats per minute, I think every single day for an hour, if I had to say intuitively, that probably would end up affecting your squat strength slightly. If you had like 2 smaller bouts of zone 2 cardio, I don't think it would affect as much. But I think that one full bout of an hour a day of zone 2 stuff, I think it would negatively affect your cardio or your squat strength. Definitely temporarily. Now, there'll come a point within 6 months to a year, if you kept this up consistently and you kept strength training consistently, you'd get a short-term hit, short-term in the terms over a decade. But in the immediate term, it would feel like quite a hit to your squat strength. Eventually, then it would become quite normal, as you'd hopefully adapt to it quite well if you gave yourself the right stimulus to your training and the right nutrition, the right sleep, and do the right kind of cardio. It also depends on what kind of cardio you're doing. So if you are sitting on a stationary bike, it will hurt it a lot less than if you were doing zone 2 jogging, for example, or if you did walking, if you could even get to zone 2 and walking. Can you get over 100 beats per minute in walking?
Probably yeah, I'd say so.
So if you're doing like 100 beats per minute walking or something, I think it would have more or less effect depending on what you're doing. Rowing might have the least amount, but swimming might have a lot more effect on your squat strength just due to the energy you'll use doing that. I definitely encourage you to do conditioning and definitely cardiovascular work for your strength, and just general healthy living and not being a fat mess, I think is incredibly valuable for being a good athlete. But I think every single day zone 2 cardio of maybe running or a stationary bike probably will, for at least a couple of months, unless you're on a significant amount of PEDs, will probably affect your squat strength. So
if you're on enough gear where it's not going to affect it, you probably need to be doing that much cardio.
Yeah, I would say that would be a priority. But I would tone it down a little bit in terms of like frequency and the amount of volume you're doing per session. Maybe you could even keep the frequency every single day, but I would definitely do the volume per that less. I'd probably keep it to like 20 to 30 minutes. But the recommendation for daily living is like 190 minutes. No, 90
150 minutes per week.
150 minutes a week. So like you'd very easily hit that, if you toned it back to half an hour even.
Yeah. And that is like, even though that's at zone 3, we're terrible at regulating our own heart rate and regulating our own intensities of exercise. Because if you're jogging or whatever you're doing to do this, it's likely that as the weeks go on, your intensity or your relative intensity will increase and you'll start pushing yourself more. The only other thing I want to add into what Garth said there is that it really matters where you're starting off from. If this is like Timmy, who kind of has been powerlifting for 3 years and hasn't done any cardio, and now he's going to change everything he's doing and he's going straight in and it's going to be an hour a day every day, that will be catastrophic to your strength training. That will matter a huge amount. The amount of adaptation energy that it will take for you to get to that level of cardio will be severe, even though it's zone 2. It's you walking while having a conversation. It will still have a large effect. If you're somebody who has been training for years, does a bit of strength training, but has good levels of cardio, and you're just looking to kind of put it down on paper, then you're already kind of well on down that road and you won't take the significant hit. So it really does matter where you're at the moment. Okay. Jasper School says, I'm after losing that. Oh, yeah. I'm a year and a half into Ollie lifting. How should I balance getting stronger squat and pushing my Olympic lifts? As reference, I can clean 115 and front squat 130. I would just say concurrent training, like getting better at both, is going to be the most effective thing you can do for a long, long time. I wouldn't necessarily, people just get into a frame of mind where they're like, oh, I'm going to get my squat up now for a while, Most of the time when people get into that frame of mind, they need a break from weightlifting, and just an off-season period would be better for them than anything else, rather than going away and squatting and really breaking yourself down with the strength work. You will be better taking 4, 6, 8 weeks of an off-season block, doing some bodybuilding, some general conditioning work, and then getting back to weightlifting and having a high level of motivation and gusto to chase your weightlifting numbers with. A lot of the time we're seeing people going and concentrating on their squats or their pulls or whatever for a while. They just wanted a break or needed a break from weightlifting, and they would have been better off taking a break rather than this kind of semi-pivot off into strength training. It would be different, Jasper, certainly if you said your clean was 115 and your front squat was 115. That would be a very different conversation, but you're better just to keep getting better at everything. Just keep moving along, prioritize the snatch and the clean and jerk, make sure you're squatting, make sure you're pulling, and then go from there. Tom Miller says,
Tom, that would be possible. Yeah, I think, Tom, you could do that. That'd be odd. But I don't know. Tom loves the snatch, and it's getting a lot better.
He loves the snatch.
Tom, it's getting a lot better for sure, which is great. So there's no reason you couldn't just run those blocks and just do the snatch stuff, the snatch and the squat stuff and the pulls. Yeah, there's literally no reason you couldn't do that. I would work very well, I would say. It's just odd.
Yeah.
But I get it. I don't get it, but I get it. You know what I mean? Like, I understand. Like, I don't understand why people... what hobbies do people have? What people play, like, aggressive competitive board games, you know?
Yeah.
I don't get it. But I appreciate what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But I get it, like, you know?
Erico Oliveira says, not a question, but noticeably improved my ankle mobility through weighted stretching. However, my Achilles took a beating from all the dorsiflexion. Absolutely, that will happen. Also, in that hinge between your kind of your foot and your shin bone, you might get some discomfort there. Keep an eye on that, certainly. Gavin Heffernan says March is great. Hit a clean and jerk PB in the Sikistan T. Nice.
Wait, did he go on a date and hit a clean and jerk PB?
No, that wasn't Gavin.
Oh, okay. That would be some whammy. That would be the double whammy.
Lackey says,
yeah.
Is 2 strength sessions per week sufficient to supplement grappling training?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Particularly if you're not doing a huge amount of strength training at the moment.
Yeah.
You will feel amazing doing 2 sessions a week.
Could I encourage you to run Seeker Strength's 10-week combat sports program, strength training for combat sports over the course of 20 weeks, for example, which you could just do that twice a week.
That would work so well.
Could I encourage you today's special to partake in that?
So you do, like, your first week of training would be day 1 and day 2, your second week of training, day 3 and day 4, and you just keep running those. Loads of people are doing that at the moment.
Evan Lee is saying, how can I increase high elbow mobility in the snatch and clean pull under? I can only get the bar to my lower chest while keeping my elbows vertical and chest open in the snatch high pull. So elbows high is internal rotation in your shoulders. In the clean, you actually don't need a lot of internal rotation for your shoulders. It's not really a prolonged position where you're like this. For your snatch, internal rotation is something you have to work quite hard on. Shoulder mobility is something that requires a lot of discomfort and compared to other ones. You know, for like your hip mobility or your ankles, you can kind of just sit there and ease into it. But with your shoulders, they've always got to be in that kind of uncomfortable position. You might need some manual therapy, either through yourself or get someone else to do it. So it might be pecs, might be an issue for the internal rotation. So if you had very tight pecs, major or minor or whatever, this will kind of drag this in here and shorten this a little bit. So you want this as free as possible. You could look at lats. You need to test your internal and external rotation. It could be different from side to side. Best thing to do is just figure out what stretches or mobility or dynamic stretches or whatever it is work best for your internal and external rotation, and then just work those very, very consistently as much as possible. I like the one where you lie on the ground, you have your arm like this, so it starts in the ground. Your partner, you get a barbell here too if you want, but if you get a friend, stand or place their foot here and pin your shoulder to the ground and don't let the ball come up off the ground, and then keeping this perpendicular, rotate this forward very slowly, and they start pushing harder and pin your shoulder more and keep pinning, and then work your way through it. If you see a good manual therapist for something, they will pull. If they feel like your pecs are tight, they'll drag this and they might pin it, and they might get you to move through that kind of 90-degree range of motion as well. It's quite good as well for the internal rotation.
A little bit of ART.
What else is there for internal rotation? I think I like sitting at the bottom of an overhead squat as well.
Yeah, just achieving that position is very good as well. You know, just with a light barbell moving through that and getting into those positions can help, because a lot of the time it's like comfort to achieve that position is the main thing. People will feel like swinging the bar out and around from them, or they'll feel like just hopping underneath rather than keeping that close.
Evan's saying, or is this position something I shouldn't worry about getting more mobile in? You know, I've never, ever seen someone go from normal to tight all the way into hypermobility with mobility work. I've never seen a weightlifter ever who has previously been tight, who I've then see do too much mobility work, gather too much range of motion in their joints, and I've said that's why he missed that lift, because he was too mobile. So I wouldn't be concerned. You can't overdo it. Now you can overdo it in terms of aggravating tissue, like Eric Oliveira said there. He aggravated his tendons, for example, which can definitely happen, and don't do that. But in terms of getting from a certain range of motion in your joints to a new and improved range of motion in joints, I've never seen this be a bad thing for a lifter. I've never seen a lifter become more mobile, because stability can easily be addressed as you go, as you improve your range of motion and stuff. But I've never seen do too much mobility work, and that actually improves it. So I've seen people do too much mobility work and just waste their time and do stupid stuff or ineffective stuff or half-assed mobility stuff and waste time in training. CrossFitters, unfortunately, are the worst for this in terms of athletes I've seen do this. But I've never seen someone effectively increase range of motion and then I've been like, oh, that's why they missed those lifts.
Yeah.
Because they had too much range of motion.
Massive Hero says, I competed in the 1976 Montreal Games. Back then, the clean and jerks were relatively good compared to today, but snatches, even years after the press went, are massively down on today. Alexi, 255 clean and jerk with a 180 snatch, for example. No one did block work back then. Has this improved the snatch so much, or what do you think? I certainly don't think block work improved the snatch by that amount. I think there's a host of other factors, and I really don't think it's like the use of blocks or the use of any particular complex. I think there's a few things going on. So the first thing is 1967 is like the heyday of anabolics. You can do whatever you want, and we've talked a lot about it. We have videos on why people round their back when they're on gear. We have videos on the effect gear might have on athletes and on coaches. And what you really need to look at is how those athletes used to train and when those athletes what those athletes used to focus on in different periods of their training, right? So weightlifting back then was train, gear, more train, more gear, right? So it's you just keep training harder, keep taking more performance enhancing drugs, and your weights will keep going up. And they keep going up until you break or you stop or something happens, right? That's just what it tended to be. Now, Massive Hero, I'm not saying this for you at all, but that tended to be what it was, right? It was quite unrefined use of anabolics back then. They just took a lot of what they were taking. They just tended to get very big and very strong. Now, getting very big and very strong is very, very good in strength sports, but you tend to lose certain aspects of fine motor control. You also tend to lose just certain aspects of range of motion and the need for technique. And that doesn't really affect the clean and jerk. That certainly doesn't affect the jerk as much. The clean it does, because the bar path loops out around. But particularly in the snatch, they were able to just pull the bar off the floor and kind of rip it overhead. And there wasn't any real refinement of technique in the broad sense. Obviously, there's people who had good technique back then, but it wasn't as much of a focus. Today, because of more testing going on, it's not that there's not as many drugs being taken, but there's more testing going on, slightly more refined use of PEDs, but now a much higher focus on technical prowess across all weight classes. I think you see the snatches being much, much higher. The snatch is inherently more technically demanding than the clean and jerk are.
Ewan McGuigan is asking...
Jeez, he's having some shot off you here, isn't he?
No, he's joking. Basically, Miso just is a full-time athlete, and he started lifting when he was 8 years old. That's like the long and the short of it, essentially. He just has been lifting for 15 or 16 years at this stage, whereas I've been lifting for just over 10 years, and he's had 15 years as a full-time athlete. I've had 10 years of students, full-time work, running a company, maintaining relationships, all that good stuff. Now, luckily, I'm in a place where I don't have to work a full-time job and run TK Strength. I can just run TK Strength, so I have more time to train, which is great. But it's just a long and short of it, just training time in a full-time environment with a world-level coach from the day he started weightlifting. You know, when he was 8, he started with a coach who was already an elite international athlete himself and already an elite international coach in a full-time environment, a phenomenal sport, and he can just train all day, every day. And his entire purpose in his life is to hit the gold medal, you know? So that's essentially that's probably the main difference. I think that sums it up, does it?
Absolutely. Mike Noth wants to know, is 3 months your longest break from training?
Like the needs us, would you like to keep your thoughts with your training? Is 3 months? So for the rally, I took 2 full months off weightlifting. I just didn't do any. We weighted like 4 times, you know. Is this the longest break? If you exclude the rally, this is the longest break where I've been barely weightlifting. Like, I would have never taken a 3-month break where I did like 1 weightlifting session a week, you know, which is something I would have never done, or maybe 2. Some weeks I didn't even do any weightlifting for the last 3 months, and totally fine. You know, it's definitely the most distance I've been from weightlifting, and it's not from it wasn't from like a what would you call it, like a desire or enjoyment thing for weightlifting. You know, it was just literally just it was a 3-month break. It just needed an off season from weightlifting. So it was definitely, I'd say it's definitely the longest and the most distant. So I've taken 3-month off seasons before where I've done like 4 sessions of weightlifting very, very consistently. You know, like last year I took an off season and I could still do like 150, 170 and ended up actually being maladaptive productive because it was just too much of a load on my joints, especially my shoulders, my wrists. By the time I went back to training then, they took a lot of a beating, you know, because I didn't give them a break. I didn't give them a chance. So this is definitely the longest and the most distance I've been kind of from weightlifting, you know. Jiu-jitsu was a great help for that because it gave me something else to massively focus on. But yeah, definitely is definitely the longest and the most separated I've been from weightlifting in terms of, and I've got to say as well, I didn't have an issue with not training. Like I didn't feel like I need to hang on to things. You know, I didn't be like, okay, I've got to touch 90% this month or whatever. Like I know it'll come back. You know, there's no problem. It'll come back. Like, and it wouldn't really come back any faster or won't make any difference to how fast I'll progress if it happened if I'd maintained those. You know, and I've learned that from experience too. So maybe it's easier for me to say that. You see this in weightlifting to an extent, but you see it a lot in powerlifting where powerlifters just cannot let go of their maxes and they cannot let go of touching those top singles, you know, and to their own detriment.
Tends to be the more amateur,
yeah,
and the less proficient lifters as well.
Yeah,
I don't know, is that a factor of they're that way and they're bad, or they're bad and it takes them a long time to improve and then they can't leave go of a PB? But like,
yeah,
you really, really need to stop holding on to numbers. Like it holds back so many people. They'll just end up treading water for ages, you know, and never making real progress.
No, you don't have to get as far out of shape as I got. Like you don't have to go all the way down. You can just like you can still train in the gym a lot. For example, you could still do like 4 sessions a week, but you could just barely do any like full squat, bench, or deadlift, you know, and still have productive training time. But it doesn't really make a difference. Like if you look at any weight, for example, after the Olympics, loads of those would have taken a lot of time off. Like Miso's taking a shitload of time off at the moment, you know. And I guarantee you by Worlds at the end of this year, we'll see him at the same level or hopefully a better level again, you know. So it's actually a video we're going to do at some stage. It's on the list of like, if people just relax a little bit more with their kind of neuroticism around training, if they took it a little bit less seriously in those sessions, they'd actually be a lot better, which is so strange. And like we see with a lot of our strength sport athletes, we see this with field sport athletes just come up in a better environment because they have that culture and they have everyone else telling them what to do and when to do it, and if their sport has those off seasons, and you can't play rugby if nobody else is playing rugby, so you just can't play rugby in the summer, you know. And that's a great way of making people do it. But in our strength sports, what we see is a lot of people are really concerned because a lot of times they'll start later in life. So they'll start in their late 20s or kind of early 30s, and they'll think, oh man, I've taken time bomb here. I've got to snatch 100 kilos. I've got to progress as much as I can, you know. And that's very admirable. And I appreciate they have a desire to be better. And that's fantastic. You know, that's great. But it's ironic that if they just relaxed a little bit more, pace themselves a little bit better, focus more on individual sessions where they're snatching 70% or squatting, or they're doing their mobility, and they just relax a little bit more, had more patience. And then when it's time to go, fucking go for it, or like unleash the beast. Like when it's time for your max session, sit home and meditate and visualize snatching that weight. That's what, because when the heavy sessions, when I do those, like I'll think about it all fucking day, like the whole day. I'll think about what I'm going to do, when I'm going to eat, what I'm going to drink, and then it will work out, But for the rest of it, all I'll think about is like the next session. I'll think about this evening, I'm not worried about trying to snatch 160 in 4 or 5 months' time. I'm thinking about today I'm going to snatch 90 for 5 doubles, and you just go boom, boom, boom. If people just relaxed a little bit more and just take it less seriously, sounds like the wrong phrase for this, but it's the best way I can describe it. If people just chilled out a small bit more, would be a lot better.
I think there's the other reason behind that as well is it forces you to have more rigidity with the planning of your blocks. Like a lot of the time people will just do that thing where Garth's talking about, where they're treading water, they're constantly staying in shape, they're always training hard, but they're never really going anywhere. They're kind of just plodding along. They don't make proper progress, and they'll stay like that forever. They'll never plan an off season. They'll never plan a prep phase. They'll never plan phases where they're going to really focus on one thing or another. And that's the level of like small amount of discipline and planning will make a massive difference to your, not only your efficacy and how well you can get on with the sport, but probably more importantly, like how well and how mentally sane you can handle a sport like weightlifting. Like weightlifting is incredibly frustrating. It's not really that fun most of the time. You'll have times where you enjoy weightlifting, but realistically, if you're training to be a competitive weightlifter, it's not a fun sport. Like it's not, oh yes, every day I get to go and do this, like it's a lot of monotony and discipline and focus. And if you just force yourself to take those defined blocks, you'll do much, much better in the long run.
I feel like that when I'm weightlifting.
Yeah.
I do every day. I'm like,
but you take really defined breaks.
I know, but like literally every time I lift, I'm like, I love this. It's one thing I see people really fuck up as well is, and this happens so much, is when they have a max day. I know what's happening. They'll fuck up the max day.
I can tell you what's happening 3 weeks in advance.
And they're thinking about it so much, they fuck it up for themselves before they've even lifted. It's like they're almost wasting all of their energy beforehand. And I can't describe it any other way. It's like they're thinking so much in their head. Their body has thought they've done a max session already. And by the time they get to training, they've already fucked the whole thing up. It's something that happens so much. It's funny. It's not funny, but it's not half funny.
No.
It's like, oh, that's funny.
It's funny, isn't it? Do you want to? We pick a few questions.
Okay, I'm going to answer next two.
Okay.
In March number 4, are we getting tank tops?
No, because you losers.
They're not
all
losers.
Not you, who I'm talking to now, but people in this live stream last week voted not to have tank tops.
No, that was on the
2 weeks ago.
That was on the Instagram poll. I'll ask them now. If they want tank tops.
Because it's because of our watchers and listeners we're not getting that I'm not getting tank tops and you're not getting tank tops. We put it out to a poll and people voted against it.
Yeah, just people didn't want them. I don't really mind, to be honest.
I'm blaming you.
It's not.
I'm looking at you.
In March number 4, there's going to be rash guards, Sika Pants version 2.0 with some improvements. There's going to be very, very nice shorts, very snazzy shorts.
Yeah.
There's going to be graphic t-shirts, but there's going to be a new style of graphic t-shirts. So it's going to be different ones. We might bring back the old ones if enough people want them, but we have a new design. So I think every March what we're going to do is have a different graphic Sikistan graphic t-shirt coming out. I'm really looking forward to this one as well. I'm really looking forward to getting this one. We kind of have the idea now. We just need to get it on paper, and it's going to be pretty cool, I think. So we're going to have different merch, graphic t-shirts every March launch, so people can kind of get a collection going. And I love having new ones on paper and putting on t-shirts.
Jim Holland just said bunch of nerds.
Siki says, hi lads, do you have any favorite adductor exercises? Yes, I do. So split squats, either front foot elevated or not, and a band pulling your knee band wrapped around your knee or your upper calf, pulling you to a externally rotated position. Quite a strong band. There should be a shitload of tension on it. It should be hard to even stand there in the split squat position and keep your knee over your toe. And then when you split up and down, it should be a fight to keep your knee over your toe. And that's one of the best ones.
Okay. A few really good questions here. George Kinnell asks a programming question, and it's, at what point do you look to add a session or a session per week to an athlete's program? Currently training 3 times a week, but I go like a year between snatch and clean and jerk PBs, 26, 8 years of training. So firstly, you look at like where you're at now and where you're comfortable and how much training you can handle. If you're at 3 days a week, George, and you're sore after every training session and you're not doing a massive amount at every training session, but they're really affecting you, like you don't feel great all the time, you're not sharp when you get into your next training session, then that's certainly not the time you look to add a session in. In weightlifting in particular, training frequency is very useful, right? Like Gerf will talk about training 12 times a week when he is in a very, very weightlifting specific block. Obviously, most people can't do that unless you're very, very genetically talented and you've been lifting weights for a long time. But certainly, it would be better to be training more than 3 times a week if you're even an amateur weightlifter, you know. Getting up to 4 sessions a week would probably be beneficial. How I would look at you and judge whether you should be going for 4 sessions a week, the first thing is your general recovery. So are you feeling really sharp when you get into your next session every time? Or is there a small bit of fatigue there? Do you feel kind of sore, achy, slow when you move around? The next thing I'd look at is the amount of work you're actually doing in the training sessions themselves. So if it's the case where you're having to do 2.5 hour long training sessions to get your snatches, your clean and jerks, your squats, your pulls, and your accessory work done, then it's just going to be better logistically to move that from 3 big belters of training sessions out to 4 slightly less big training sessions. So the logistics of training for 2.5 hours just doesn't work for most people. You know, a shorter session would be more beneficial. The last thing I'd look at then is where your relative weaknesses lie, right? So we talk about needs analyses all the time. Do your weaknesses lie in the fact that you're not getting enough strength training in, or do your weaknesses lie in the fact that you're not getting enough mobility work in, or do your weaknesses lie in the fact that you're not getting enough specific skill practice in? Now, all these things have slightly different answers. If it's a skill practice one, then certainly higher frequency of training is going to be super beneficial. If it's the mobility thing, then more training certainly won't help. You probably need to be focusing on your mobility a huge amount and then looking to add some extra training sessions. If it's the strength training one, you need to actually quantify your volume over the course of the week and see if you're hitting requisite amount of volume you need for strength outcomes. But hopefully that'll give you a kind of idea of where you might need to start looking. Certainly for weightlifters, 4 days a week would be beneficial. That's why our programs are 4-day-a-week programs for most weightlifters.
Patrick's asking, did all the thickness in my hands and forearms come from weightlifting? I think it came from genetics and growing up on a farm. I think before weightlifting.
Yeah.
Because I've seen plenty of weightlifters with small hands and forearms.
I don't think you get hand size from not doing things when you're a child. It's like having big calves.
Yeah, my fingers definitely got thicker as I got older.
Yeah.
Like just they've turned into my dad's hands in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, you obviously just that density from doing stuff. You just build that muscle in your hands too, I suppose. I suppose those ligaments and stuff, mostly it's tendons, ligaments as much as muscle, you know, and like those tendon ligaments take a long time to get thicker. You know?
Yeah. A lot of that is like years and years and years of just moving things.
It's getting straighter. Sending the
thingy.
Yeah, it's a lot straighter. So it was really straight once I took off the splint, you know, but it gradually after like a day or two
fell
with the here, but now it's like kind of there. So just have to keep doing this. It takes a couple of weeks for this to work though.
Dave Berman, right, says, how does coaching work at a world-class or Olympic level? Isn't the athlete in uncharted territory? How would a coach know what's best for them than the athlete themselves would? Okay, so Dave, this is a bit of a misconception, right? The life of an elite athlete, although is uncharted territory for that athlete, the athlete's family, club that athlete grew up training in, the possibly the county or the province that athlete was born into, is probably not uncharted territory for the world of elite sport coaching. Most of the time, elite sport coaches have developed their career and their skills over a huge amount of time. They'll usually have worked in an underage setting, or they'll have worked in developmental setups where they are working with talented athletes who are just as talented as that Olympic level athlete are, and they're probably working with them early on in their career. Then out after a number of years, they'll work into a more senior role, and then at the kind of peak of their career, they're going to be an Olympic level coach. Almost nobody at the Olympics is doing anything that hasn't been seen before, even if it's something like a technique that's going to win a world record, or it's a string of performances that are uncharted that we've never seen before, something like Phelps winning that many medals in a row. The training that athlete does is in no way revolutionary. Even when you hear about revolutionary training techniques, it's not. It's drugs, training, good genetics, and good environment. It really isn't. It may be uncharted in the area they're from, maybe uncharted in the club they started training in, but it's almost never uncharted territory. There's always a coach there who has trained an athlete just as good as you or better than you. You just haven't found them yet, And in the case where the last part of this question, it's the one I really wanted to answer, is like, how would the coach know what's best for them than the athlete themselves would? The athlete themselves rarely knows what's best. Good athletes, their main job is being an athlete. They don't need to think about programming. They don't need to coach themselves. They don't need to show up to training sessions and think about planning training sessions. Their whole job is being the athlete. They show up, they're told what to do, they perform what they were told to do, and then they make the changes they were asked to make. Their job is not to try and design training systems. Their job is not to have to cue themselves. Their job is not to do biomechanical analyses of anything. The job of being an athlete is so, so difficult and requires so much buy-in that they can't be coaching themselves. And it wouldn't be realistic to expect an athlete to understand what's best for him or herself. The athlete, their job is to make sure they're in a good physical and mental condition when they show up to training and competition, perform what they're asked to perform, and then go back and recover again.
Like, it's not, their training is basically the same as all the other athletes. It's just the magnitude of their own performance is higher. The training for someone trying to snatch 200 kilos is pretty similar to the training of someone trying to snatch 185 kilos. It's not that different. It's just that athlete happens to be better and the numbers they're doing. So the training will actually, for world records, will be fairly similar for the training another elite athlete would do to hit 95% of their world record. It just so happens that particular athlete, for whatever reasons, has a magnitude or a capacity to hit higher values, So the actual training they're doing isn't largely different. Now, they're still in an atmosphere of their own compared to an intermediate athlete or a beginner athlete or a shit amateur, They're in their own band, and their own band has that particular kind of training, and elite athletes have, certain volumes and stuff that they do in certain frequencies. They do all that stuff. But they don't, it doesn't actually, you don't need new methods to hit world records. It's the individual athlete, how they respond to that particular training is what makes the world records. Like, Lasha trains the same as all the other super heavies on the Georgian team has and probably will. It just so happens that he gets more out of the drugs, and he's really genetically a fucking freak of nature and has a good psychology for that, So he's training. That's why Georgi Adzhanidze can get him to 225. Georgi Adzhanidze doesn't need to have coached someone to 225 before. He just needs to take him through the correct process for performance. And that's why, you can do that with a lot of their athletes. Once you figure out what works really well for athletes, you can start helping a lot of different people. It just so happens that Lasha is individual who could snatch 225 as opposed to someone else who would only stop at 215 or 205 or 105.
I have one more question. Jay Nones has a question. High Secret Strength. I'm currently a high school athlete right now that plays soccer, basketball, and track. During off season or on season, should I train both the clean and jerk and the snatch with powerlifting for explosiveness? I'm currently grasping the basics. So Jay Nones, there's a few it depenses coming up here, right? the first it depends is where do you want to go with your athletics. If you're not quite sure and you want to kind of keep a few doors open for yourself, I would be focusing on really nice squat, press, deadlift, and rows, and then getting good at the power clean or getting good at the full clean. If you're somebody who wants to be a thrower or a weightlifter, I would keep doing full snatch, full clean and jerk, because it's probably going to focus quite heavily in your training if you're a thrower, and it obviously will focus quite heavily if you're a weightlifter. If you're not in either of those groups, I would say it's the squat, bench, deadlift, and row with the addition of a clean or a power clean are the things you really want to focus on. What you want to be getting to is by the time you're a senior in high school or by the time you're finished high school and looking to go to college, what you really want is to have the fundamentals nailed down. So when you can start pushing really heavy weights, you don't have to then go and learn the movements. Realistically, the amount you'll get out of a snatch or a full clean and jerk won't have any athletic advantage over what you'll get from a power clean with a strong squat, deadlift, row, and press behind you. In terms of athletic performance. Now, if you want to be a weightlifter, the time is now, or the time is as early as you can possibly make it in high school. But yeah, I would say kind of have a look at where you want to go with your training. And if you want to just be a better athlete, then master the fundamentals, become really good at those, build a high level of efficacy with those, and start kind of bumping those numbers up. And I wouldn't worry too much about the snatch or the clean and jerk.
Could I ask everyone a favor before we go? We don't often ask for favors in live stream. Could you just go follow our TikTok? Because you can't go live on TikTok until you've like 1,000 followers. And obviously there's a lot of people using TikTok. And we're putting work into the shorts at the moment. And I'm really enjoying editing the shorts. So we're not getting Alex to do the shorts because I just want to see what we want from them. So if you could just go follow our TikTok and like the stuff.
That would be so beneficial for us.
That'd be swell. That'd be really heavily appreciated. That would be massively appreciated. He's only 120. 316 followers. I think you need 1,000 followers. And live on TikTok goes really far sometimes. Not if you're like Dar's not a hot girl, but he's as close as we can get. That's as close as we can do. Dar's the best we can do for a hot girl.
Mike Knott says he doesn't have TikTok. Mike, just go and make an account and subscribe to us. That would be great.
Then steal your mom's phone and steal your grandmother's phone.
Yeah. If you could steal 3 people's phones and subscribe to us on TikTok, we'd be so grateful.
Yeah.
It would make our weekend.
Yeah. Install the malware.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for watching. We'll be back next week.
Also on the tank top vote, it's approximately 50-50, so that's just not convincing enough from my end.
And someone said, I didn't realize Sika was a democracy. Well, what Sika Strength is, above all else, is a company, so myself and no one can keep making these videos. And if nobody buys tank tops, then we'll run out of money and we'll have to go back to normal jobs.
I'm not that attached to tank tops. I'm pretty here nor
there. I like them.
Yeah, I know you do, but it's people don't want them. Like, there's no point. You can't wear 100 tank tops.
You're dead right, and I certainly won't pay for them. Thanks for watching.